It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Today on the Happy Families Podcast, we're letting go of parenting. I think we are letting go of parenting and just focusing on us for a minute. It's the Book Club podcast where Kylie and I talk about the things that we've been reading, what we've loved, what we haven't. It's unfiltered. I always feel a little bit guilty about this because when I talk badly about a book, I just know how hard it is to write a book. I'm currently slowly dying over the book that I'm writing, and I would just be so devastated if somebody said, yeah, didn't like it, wasn't that good. And yet, that's the whole idea, right? Book Club gives you an opportunity to talk about the stuff that you're reading. Kylie, you usually give me a hard time because I have approximately, 8 to 15 books each time we do this. I don't have so many this time. But you, on the other hand, have 4. So you're up. What have you got for us?
Well, I've had to make up because I haven't been doing a lot of reading lately. And the last few times I've cheated a little bit because I've had to use homeschool reads to even have a contribution.
Such a cheat, I know. Hey, speaking of homeschool reads, I've just picked up Lord of the Flies. I'm not talking about it today because I'm only 40 pages in, but it's an exceptionally good book. I hated it at high school, but my goodness, I'm loving it. Anyway, so have you got homeschool reads for us again?
No, I don't. In my list of 4, I actually have 2 that you've already spoken about on the podcast.
Oh.
So I'm actually just going to kind of just briefly mention them.
So these are books that I read.
These are books that you read.
And you decided to pick up.
Based on your recommendation, I thought I'd give them a go.
Here we go. What was the first one?
So the first one was The Measure by Nikki Ehrlich.
Oh, yeah. I love this book.
So this was a really provocative read. It was actually first published in 2022. So I wonder if COVID and the pandemic, worldwide pandemic, actually had anything to do with influencing the storyline and the way she wrote it.
The short part of the plot here is that everybody wakes up one morning and there's a box on their doorstep with a piece of string inside it, and the string shows you the measure of your life, how long essentially you're going to live. And then people start to live their lives accordingly. And there's this polarization around how people respond to people with short strings versus long strings and who should get what government benefits. And it's just a fascinating book. I loved it. Great original thought experiment.
Well, it also kind of looked into how different countries handled it.
Right,
and
yes.
the impact that it had on individuals and collectively as a country. It looked at, different families and different couples, like how they coped with it and dealt with it. Firstly, I actually found it a really hard read. I found it really hard to get into it. You're following 8 different characters, and so it's one of those books where each chapter is written from a different character's perspective. I have never read a book with so many characters to try and follow. So I'm going to put it down to the fact that I had very limited headspace as well, because by the time I got to the last 100 pages, I couldn't put it down. And I think that things were starting to pick up for me in my own personal life. But the one down for me is there is actually a huge amount of swearing. So if you're not someone who actually enjoys that kind of writing, hopefully you've got someone who's as sensitive a reader as you are and has gone through it and scrubbed out all of the bad words for you. Thanks, hon. That made it much easier to digest.
Yeah, I don't like bad words either.
But I think ultimately, like I said, very provocative. There were so many opportunities to kind of just think through how you would deal with this. And like I said, for me, it kind of really highlighted some of the challenges that we'd experienced as a community with COVID and the different ways, even just within our own country, different states dealt with things and the impact moving forward that has created for different families, individuals and communities as a whole. So the big question, honey, is, would you open your box?
I asked you the same question on the podcast ages ago, and I don't remember what you said, but I said no. I don't want to know. I want to live my life without that, without the reassurance. I just, no. The short answer is no, I wouldn't want to know.
Yeah.
Have you read the book and had a change of heart? What do you think?
No, not at all. I just think because most people were opening their boxes, I probably would have just done it without even really thinking about it. It wouldn't have been in the beginning for me. I don't think it would have been a huge, big deal. But obviously, the longer people chose not to open it, the bigger it actually became. So for me, ultimately, it's really a story about how do you measure a life? And I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but that whole idea of do you measure a life in the years lived or the way you choose to live your life? Like I really just, ultimately, if you know you've only got a handful of days or a handful of months or whatever, does that impact the way you choose to spend your time and who you choose to spend it with? And it was just, I thought there was definitely some really great opportunities for introspective thinking about how you choose to live your life and how you choose to use the time that you've been gifted.
What did you give it out of 5?
4.
Okay.
I gave it 4.
All right. I'm 5 all the way. I loved it. Thought it was a great book. What's your second one?
Well, I picked up a Nicholas Sparks book at the book co-op, secondhand book co-op.
I don't know why I'm laughing at that. Go on.
It's called The Rescue.
Oh, it sounds great.
And I'm just going to put it out there. I really love a good romance.
Of course you do.
Yes. And after having read The Measure and really working hard to get through it, I knew that I just needed something really easy, light, and something that would kind of just allow me to keep flowing. So this was a really easy yes. It was actually a really, again, a thoughtful story. A firefighter with a tragic past, and he finds himself compelled to save people from his fate.
Sounds original. Sounds.
You're so harsh.
I know. All right. I kind of just want to find out what you gave it out of 5, so we can move on to another book.
It was everything you expect from Nicholas Sparks.
That's my point.
And I would give it a 3.5.
Yeah, that's my
super easy read.
All right, you've got 2 more, and we're really tight on time.
Well, I'm not going to talk too much about Troubled by Rob Henderson. Again, another book that you read.
Yes,
very different style to what I would normally pick up.
Just before you go on, Troubled by Rob Henderson, 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, 100%. Just a brilliant memoir from my perspective. Did you agree or disagree?
No, I thought it was a really, really good book. I loved it until the last handful of chapters where he goes all psychology on me.
He's gone all Ivy League. He's a big shot PhD psychology guy. And
up until that point, he had me completely hooked, and then he lost me.
Right, okay.
So I almost didn't finish the book.
Wow.
Because it's gone from a memoir now to, a full-on science textbook.
I didn't think that it was that hard, but then again, I've got a PhD in psychology. Are you glad you read it though? Was it worth pushing through to the end? I
think it's really important for us to see people's lives from different perspectives and to delve into different ways of living. This was so outside the box of anything that I've personally experienced in my life, and so tragic in so many ways. And it kind of had me thinking, because we have associated with different people who've either been foster carers or kids who've lived in foster homes with, friends with our children, and just watching it from afar, not really understanding why certain decisions are made and why it just seems so transient.
Right.
When there are families who are really happy to keep children in their care for long times. And so he really just kind of helped me see different, the thought process behind it. I don't agree with it necessarily, but just the thought process behind why government organisations make the decisions they do. But ultimately, devastating.
It's a book that I just rate so highly. I'm so glad that you read it and persisted with it. Really, really great stuff. Troubled, Rob Henderson. Okay, 4th and final.
The last one for you is The Winter Dress. It's by Lauren Chater. I actually loved this.
More fiction?
It's actually a novel written about a dress that was found on a shipwreck, obviously deep under the sea, completely intact from the 1700s. And how the historians went about trying to find its original owner. And it was just a really, really cool story, going through the process of, I guess, that treasure hunt process of trying to piece together minute details that would ultimately give you the big picture. And I could see how people who are inclined in that way could have so much fun. Just real, it's like going on a treasure hunt.
It's funny listening to you, because you've read 3 fiction and 1 non-fiction, a memoir, and I don't know why, but I'm so automatically dismissive of fiction, and yet there's so much there, except for the Nicholas Sparks one, of course. But But I love hearing. What did you give The Winter's Dress out of?
Look, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5.
Wow.
I actually loved this book.
Wow.
I really loved it from start to finish. It was so well written.
I wasn't expecting that.
And it was such, like I said, just such a different storyline. So historically, kind of sound, had some great relationship connections in there, which I enjoy. I really enjoyed the mystery behind the piece and how it ended up there, and how a lazy historian wants to just tack it on to what would be the obvious answer, and yet another kind of younger historian has decided that definitely doesn't fit the bill. There is more to the story.
A 1700s textile mystery, The Winter Dress, Lauren Chater, 5 out of 5. Now, you've spoken so long about your 4 books that I've barely got any time for my my book club, Kylie, and that.
Well, have you got 8 books?
No, I don't. And the reason for that is because 3 of the books that I've read in the last little while have had religious orientations, and I'm just not going to talk about them. But I am going to talk really quickly about 2. I'm just going to 3. I'm going to mention 3, but I'm going to do it really fast. Okay. The first one is very quick and easy to talk about. Every now and again, a memoir pops onto my shelf that I think, oh my goodness, this is going to be incredible. So in this book, I read 200 pages of a 280-page book. This memoir is about a guy, Sandy Greenberg. He's, because of medical misfortune and poor choices, ends up blind at the age of 19. He goes on to live this incredible life. I mean, an extraordinary life. Unfortunately, the book was, he may have had an amazing life, but the autobiography was dull. And especially after reading some of the autobiographies that I've read this year, Jane Ferguson, No Ordinary Assignment. We talked just before about Rob Henderson and Troubled. And some journalistic brilliance from people like Hannah Barnes with Time to Think. It just, I don't know, it was a bit of a disappointment. I stopped reading, didn't even finish the book. And I know that I was getting to the best bit, but I couldn't keep going with it. So that's the first one. It was called Hello Darkness, My Old Friend. And the reason it had that title is because he was roommates at university with Art Garfunkel. And again, there's this incredible opportunity to tell this amazing story. I mean, he helped fund the beginning of Garfunkel's career with Paul Simon. They sang Bridge Over Troubled Waters and Sound of Silence and all that sort of stuff. And it just wasn't there. It was lacking. Oh, there was so much potential for it. I wanted it to be so good.
Especially when
wasn't.
You've used that title.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Great title.
Walked away from it. The next book that I want to mention is called The Expat. Kylie, it was a novel. I picked up a novel because I've been reading so much heavy stuff. I just wanted.
You give me a hard time, and then you turn around.
I know. And it was a spy novel. Do you know what? It was really fun. It was easy to read. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. It was really fascinating to consider the implications of corporate espionage. So this is a book that's about Asian Americans being contacted by the Chinese Communist government. These Asian Americans are working in some of the biggest companies in the United States, and they're essentially being asked to come back to China and bring all of the corporate secrets from the big American companies with them. It was really intriguing, like really compelling. And you sort of think about spies with all the government secret sort of stuff. But when you look at what's going on from a corporate perspective and a stock market perspective, you can see how this is so compelling. I really got into it. I really liked it.
How do you decide you're going to be a spy?
4 out of 5. I reckon I could have given it more, but it was a novel, so it's got to be a pretty good novel to get more than 4 out of 5 in my book. My 5 out of 5 book for the last month or so.
Oh, you had one of those?
Yeah. This was an incredible book. It was called The Weirdest People in the World by a Harvard anthropologist.
You told me this was so hard to get through.
Called Joseph Henrich. It was extremely hard. Probably too dense, probably too long, and I'm still giving it 5 out of 5 anyway. Weirdest People in the World. Weird stands for Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich and Democratic. And what he's basically done is he's picked up where Guns, Germs and Steel left off.
Same author?
No, Jared Diamond wrote Guns, Germs and Steel, which I think is one of the most important books that I've ever written. It's incredible.
Ever read?
Did I say I've ever written? Oh, wow. I wish I'd written that I've ever read. Powerful, profound. And it traces the history of why nations have succeeded or failed. And you know what Guns, Germs and Steel did is it turns the narrative that we get in our schools, the stuff that our kids are being taught about the history of the world, history of civilizations, history of cultures. I mean, it's really politically incorrect, but the evidence that it turns it all on its head, and it's brilliant. Anyway, this one picks up from where he left off, and Joseph Heinrich looks at essentially the psychological changes that have happened in the last couple of thousand years as civilization did what Jared Diamond talked about in Guns, Germs and Steel, and why we are so weird. He really highlights that if we live in a Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic nation, that we are the weird ones compared with the rest of the history of the world and the rest of the cultures that even exist now. We are so weird in our psychology compared to what the world has always been. It's just extraordinary. It's really, really, really hard to read because it is so detailed. It's extremely serious. It's a really heavy read. Nothing easy about it, but worth the slog. Absolutely worth it. And again, it has further revolutionized my understanding of how the world is, how it is. And it also makes me more and more infuriated when I look at some of the things that people say on social media, or some of the things that the mainstream media will say, or journalists will say, or some of the things that that are taught in our schools. Because this is not some guy with an agenda. This is deep, real research. It's evidence-based research. It's not just some speculation. And I loved it. The Weirdest People in the World, 5 out of 5. Amazing book. So that is our book club for today. Thank you, Kylie, for sharing your 4 books, including The Measure, Rob Henderson, The Winter Dress, and what was that other one?
The Rescue.
Oh, that's right. The Nicholas, whatever his name is. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And my ones, we'll link to them in the show notes. We've got The Expat by Hanson She. We've got, you know what, we won't even link to Sandy Greenberg. It just wasn't that great. But we will definitely link to The Weirdest People in the World by Joseph Henrik. Hopefully there's some inspo there for you to dive into and read as we move towards, I don't know, the end of the year. Something for a Christmas stocking, maybe. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rule. I'm from Bridge Media. For more information about the stuff we've talked about, check the show notes. Otherwise, visit us at our Facebook page, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families.